Go ahead.
All right, the January 21st, 2021 Finance Committee is now called to order. This is being conducted remotely for the purpose of protecting public health and in compliance with directives as allowed by Illinois Public Act 640, available through Zoom. Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations and Chief School Business Official Michael DiBartolo is physically present at the CCSD21 Guild Administration Center. I need to establish a quorum. Arlen Gould.
Here.
Stacy Getz.
Yes.
All right. We have a full committee quorum of 3. I'm Phil Pritzker. Any individual wishing to share a public comment must complete the public comment form linked on the agenda prior to starting the public comment section of the meeting. Individual needs to be connected to the meeting via Zoom and use their first and last name as their Zoom screen name. Written public comments may also be submitted by emailing to district21@ccsd21.org. We are now in the public.
We lost you, Phil. We're not hearing you.
Okay.
Oh, you're back.
Now we hear you.
Okay. Cara, have we received any written public comments?
No written comments.
Thank you very much, Cara. At this point, we are ready to go into our committee discussion. I believe we have 2 items, Michael, our audit and 10-year capital needs plan. I'll let you lead it off.
Sounds good. We are going to have a presentation from Nick Cavalier, who is one of the partners at Baker Tilly. He is our lead auditor. As you know, we went out for an RFP on audit services this year, and I will let Nick take away his presentation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you guys can see the presentation. As Nick tells me to flip through the slides, we will go ahead.
You know what, Mike, I think I can share my screen.
Oh, perfect. Why don't you do it then, Nick?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. I am going to attempt to share my screen. I think you guys should be able to see a PowerPoint presentation at this time.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we were engaged to conduct an audit for the school district's financial statements. We have substantially completed our audit procedures on the district's financial statements and also conducted a federal compliance audit, which is commonly referred to as a single audit. We are anticipating the issuance of all of our reports by early February of 2021. The scope of our audit includes the district's annual financial statements. There's a document called a Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards that we audit, a report called the Consolidated Year-End Financial Report that we audit, which is required by the Grant Accountability and Transparency Unit of the state of Illinois. We also perform an audit of the district's annual financial report that the Illinois State Board of Education requires. As previously mentioned, we do conduct a single audit over the district's spending of federal dollars. And then we will be issuing a report on internal control over financial reporting, in addition to any matters that we may have identified regarding compliance with laws and regulations. Our anticipated results for our audit is that we will be rendering an unmodified audit opinion on the district's financial statements. An unmodified audit opinion is the highest level of assurance that you can receive from your external auditor that the financial statements present fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. That's what you want to hear when the external auditor comes to speak about the results that they're able to render. There's also several other schedules and documents that we perform audit procedures over, and we anticipate rendering unmodified audit opinions on those documents as well. The Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards, the Consolidated Year-End Financial Report, and the Illinois State Board Annual Financial Report. In regards to the single audit, the district had expended over $750,000 of federal awards. When a government spends that much money of federal dollars, there's a requirement that you have a single audit performed. It's a compliance audit. It's also focusing on your internal controls over the use of those dollars. The 2 major programs that we audited during fiscal year 20 was the child nutrition cluster. So think of that as your national school lunch program, the school breakfast program, in addition to the summer foods program that was implemented as a result of the pandemic. We also performed audit procedures over the special education cluster, or the IDEA program, which is a federal award that's used to assist in funding special education programming. The district expended approximately $8 million of federal awards. We actually tested about 69% of those federal awards based on the type of audit that was required for this particular fiscal year. We had a requirement to test 20% of your federal awards, and we weren't able to get that with the special education IDEA cluster because it was slightly below 20%. So we had to also pick up the child nutrition cluster for coverage. The type of audit report that we anticipate rendering over our procedures for the single audit is an unmodified audit opinion over compliance. So that means our audit procedures do not identify any material non-compliance issues. At the same time, when conducting a single audit, we're also looking at the internal controls that were in place to ensure compliance with the federal awards provisions. And we did not identify any material weaknesses over internal controls on those two federal awards that we tested. So very good job. That's the highest grade, so to speak, or the highest level of assurance that we can render on your use of those federal dollars. What I will go briefly into is that, this was our first year performing the audit for the school district. And during the course of our audit procedures, we did identify several restatements to the district's financial statements, restatements regarding the initial starting point of the district's fund balances and then net position, which is another schedule that's in the financial reports. The restatements were across multiple funds, but they can be summarized regarding the accounting procedures and the way the property tax were calculated for receivables and revenues, state and federal aid, certain liability accounts that were represented in the financial statements, amounts related to the pension and other post-employment plans that are required to be reported and disclosed in your financial statements, in addition to some presentation within the financial statements. One of the things that I just wanted to point out, when we issue the financial statements, there will be a very large note regarding all these individual inputs, but I wanted to just draw attention to one particular fund, which is the district's general fund, and that consists of your ed fund and your working cash fund for external reporting purposes. The beginning fund balances for that fund itself were restated from approximately $28.2 million to $40.3 million. So an actual increase in your fund balance position.
Nick, if I could interrupt really quick, on Saturday, board members, when we talked about at the committee of the whole meeting, the roughly $9 million, that's because the working cash fund restatement was not included in those numbers. Nick had updated it, and now that's in there, and that's how we got to the nearly $12 million of restatement.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. A set of financial statements have a lot of different schedules in it. When I like to come and speak to a finance committee and the board as a whole, there's typically one schedule that I like to pull out and really point out to the board so that they can have a good picture of how the district performed for the year. And this is essentially your income statement. So what you'll see is that each fund is presented in column format. Revenues are at the top, expenditures are in the middle, and then this category down here, other financing sources and uses, is used to account for transfers between funds and activity relating to the issuance of debt. And then at the bottom, you'll have like a net change in fund balance, and then your starting point for the year, and then your ending point. Page 15 of the schedule, what I like to always think of is the operations of the district. In the general fund, it consists for your district, your education fund and your working cash fund. And then your tort immunity fund, operations and maintenance, transportation. And then one other fund is really something that you should also consider operational, is the IMRF fund, the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund. These funds together really are used to account for the day-to-day activities of the district. The debt service fund is more or less used for servicing of bond payments, and then also for accounting regarding any new issuances that took place during the year that were required to be presented in that fund. The capital projects fund is the fund that you use for very large capital improvements and projects at the district. And then the Fire Prevention and Safety Fund for your district doesn't have sizable activity, but is very restricted as to its use. The only types of expenditures that can be placed there must be on your approved life safety plan. But looking at the district's, fund balances and, operational results for the year, the district had, healthy results at the end of the fiscal year. One of the things that I wanted to point out, eventually when you do get copies of the issued financial statements, the general fund does have schedules within it, the financial statements that'll show you the breakout. You typically will manage the district's day-to-day finances knowing you have an educational fund and a working cash fund. There's a balance sheet report that will be in the financial statements that will show those separately, and then there will also be an income statement report that will show those separately. In your previously issued financial statements, the district's working cash fund was not consolidated within the general fund. That's a required presentation under a Governmental Accounting Standards Board issuance 54. So when we came in to perform the audit, we restated the general fund starting point because this balance was not included in the general fund. And that's one of the things that Michael just discussed, previously, the $3.7 million and $3.8 million starting point, or $3.8 million at the end of the fiscal year, was shown as a separate fund last year, and this year it's included in your general fund. In preparing for tonight's meeting, I just wanted to point out, one data point. There's many that I can talk off, but I don't want to overwhelm the board this evening. I know you have a packed agenda. One of the things I just wanted to show you was a fund balance ratio calculation. So what I focused on was the general fund because that's the primary operating fund of the school district. Your expenditures for the year were $108.4 million. Within those balances are a payment that was made by the state of Illinois. It's an estimate that's made on behalf of the district to assist in the funding for the teacher's retirement system and a teacher's health insurance system. This particular expenditure that's reported in your external financial statements is estimated at $24.8 million. This is an amount that's never run through your day-to-day transactions, but it's required for external reporting. So if I wanted to present a true fund balance ratio, I would back that expenditure out from the $108.4 million to get you to a district's net expenses in the general fund of about $83.6 million. The general fund's ending fund balance was $54.4 million. And then your ending ratio of your general fund expenditures to fund balances for the general fund was approximately 65%, that ratio. Within the general fund includes the working cash fund that we discussed earlier. If I was to exclude the working cash fund balance, we would get you to a ratio of approximately 60%. So in the general fund at the end of fiscal year 20, you had a fund balance ratio to expenditures of approximately 60%. I wanted to keep my presentation brief. I have, I think, about 11 minutes, and I would be happy to take any questions that the board may have. Also understand that additional questions might come about once the financial statements are issued, and I'd be more than happy to come back and speak as well then.
Nick, this is Phil. Give us an idea of that 60% ratio. Where does that put us in the continuum of good shape, bad shape? Are we in the middle? What's that mean for us?
I would say, if you were to look around at neighboring districts, that's probably consistent within the area. As you go further south in the state, those fund balance ratios aren't necessarily as high. 60%, there's school districts down, in central and southern Illinois that are much lower. But I think within the region, between 50 to 75%, I typically see, I audit about 40 school districts, within the state of Illinois. So this is not excessive by any stretch of the imagination. I think this is, probably closer to what you would see at some districts throughout your area.
Okay, thank you. Stacy, Arlen, any questions for Nick or Michael?
I just had one that I've been wondering about for years and years and never thought to ask it, frankly. So what I would love to see, Nick, would be what our fail-safe controls are regarding checks being written properly in accounting and how they're logged in, and what our prevention methods are from somebody at some point in the future trying to pull a fast one.
Mhm. Yeah, when we're conducting a financial statement audit, our primary goal is to provide assurances over the financial statements themselves. What we will be issuing is a report over internal control over financial reporting. So when conducting a financial statement audit in accordance with governmental auditing standards, we have to gain an understanding of the internal controls that are in place over the presentation of the financial statements. We also look at some cycles, payroll, accounts payable, to gain an understanding of the control environment that's present. But we don't actually render assurance over your internal control structure's effectiveness. If we identify any risks during our assessment, we'll communicate those to the board and to management. We will be issuing a second report regarding that. And that scope, understand, is, again, for the purposes of the financial statements themselves, which could be a good starting point for you to think a little bit more about the internal controls. But there's also an ability to do a further deeper dive where you walk through key processes and can do a little bit more recommendations and things like that as well.
Arlen, I'll tell you, in addition, Arlen, we, for external controls, we have positive pay and positive payee with BMO. So that makes sure nobody changes either the payee on the check or the dollar amounts. And internally, our approval process of payments, whether it be accounts payable or purchasing, is multi-layered so that you don't have somebody pushing through something that they can then have paid to themselves or a third-party entity. So, but it is also something that we always look at.
Okay, I mean, it has happened to other districts clearly, and obviously in all the years that I'm here, we've never looked at that kind of process and assured ourselves of that, and so that's why I raise it.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Nick, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Have a good evening.
The final audit coming to us.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
And just for clarification too, on the timeliness of it, we are not alone in it being as late as it is. COVID has obviously caused a lot of this to be done remotely, which is an interesting process compared to them coming on board into the building and going through files. So we've talked to the ROE, they're okay with the time frame, and the state board is aware of it as well.
Okay. You want to lead us into our second item, the 10-year capital plan?
Absolutely. And obviously the dollars that we're seeing surpluses of in the audit lead us to our continuation of planning for the future. And so George and I talked about when I came on board after we did the first year of construction and got into the second year, we probably need to go ahead and redo the long range plan because the last one was 2014. Obviously, the referendum spend brought a new group of priorities and expenditures that would be made, but also the fact that it was as old as it was, we needed to redo it because we were essentially 6-7 years into it when we started the referendum spend. And now we had some new priorities that we were recognizing. And so we've gone ahead and done a new 10-year plan. George is here to report on it tonight on the base plan. We're going to identify the prioritization of items over the next few months before we bring it to the full board for approval. But I'll let George go ahead and talk about what is in the 10-year plan.
Welcome, George.
Hi, guys. Hi, everybody. I think you stole a lot of my thunder because Mike told me I only had 10 minutes to speak. So his condensing was probably 45 minutes of my speech. So we'll be good. But it's been a while. I see everybody. It's good to see everyone.
Hi.
I'm glad to be here tonight and kind of give you guys an update. I'm going to minimize my screen because I'm going to share my screen. So you guys won't be seeing me as much for the next little while as we kind of focus more on the plan itself. So as Michael had mentioned, we looked at the old long range plan and said it's time to kind of redo and kind of update to where we are today. But the reason for it, and this is a natural course. I mean, if you look at it, when we did this multiple years ago and we got into the referendum, we had a number of key priorities that we wanted to tackle front and center, right? We wanted to bring air conditioning to all your schools. We wanted to get full day K into your buildings, and we wanted to create safe and secure entrances. I'm saying 3 years because I'm including this coming summer as well, the 2021 work that we just went out to bid for. Really, once we cross this summer's work, those 3 key pieces are going to be taken care of, right? Year 1, we did all that air conditioning. Year 2, we did all the secure entrances and air conditioning. Year 2, we did the full day K that didn't exist in the number of schools, and we furnished the ones that had it. Well, this summer is their catch up. This summer, we're getting equity to the remaining 4 buildings and getting all of them to have the same 21st century level of finishes, renovation work. So all your kindergarten classrooms are equal across the board. We've also been roping in a number of mechanical pieces that are aged equipment as we've been tackling the buildings themselves. It makes sense. Touch the building once rather than touch it multiple times. So we kind of parceled out the work that became digestible. And I think we have a good scale of work coming up this summer that we'll find out next week when it comes in bidding, that we can potentially do all that work. So now we're getting to the next stage, the next layer of priorities. And as we've started revisiting your long range plan, a number of other things kind of came up. The idea of rolling out 21st century learning throughout all your schools, not just from a furniture perspective, but from a renovation perspective. The ideas of the innovation centers, looking at what it would cost to kind of renovate all those. Then we actually had our engineers look at all your mechanical equipment and all your aged equipment. And we had a really good tally of the years of every piece of, or every item that you have in every one of your buildings, from boilers to rooftop units to water heaters, AC, or existing unit vents that you have in your building, piping, you name it. We now have a clear depiction of when they were all installed, how old they are, and when they need replacement. So we took that information and roped that into this new study. We also looked at your existing toilet rooms, how those are working, how we want to renovate those, how certain ones aren't working properly, like at Riley. How can we kind of separate and get the boys and girls and all wings so they're not kind of traveling long distances throughout the building to get to. Then we looked at, if we're modernizing the classrooms, can we modernize all the hallways, get LED lighting throughout? These are the types of priority lists that have evolved over the last few months that we wanted to make sure got encompassed in this plan. So we're not throwing away the old plan. We're keeping the key items of it, but we're adding on to it for things that have been kind of becoming more front and center. So that was the challenge. So over the last number of months, we've taken all those items and we've updated it for every building. And what you guys received is kind of the 86-page document. And I'm not going to go through all 86 pages, but really I want to kind of lead you guys to understand how it's digestible, how it's readable, and then kind of answer kind of a high-level questions you may have. It's targeted by the first page is a summary page, and we've made a number of bullets. We have site. So site includes playgrounds, patching of all your asphalt repair, from maintenance to full replacement. So if you look at your asphalt and your parking lots, usually when you pave it, you have a number of years. Every 4 years, you're going to crack fill and seal coat and patch. After a certain amount of time, about 8 to 10 years, you're hitting a point of threshold where, okay, we can't crack fill anymore. We got to replace. We got to grind them down and redo. So you have a mixture of that on your site items. If you sidewalk repair, life safety items like if your sidewalk's kind of heaving in certain areas, or curbs have chipped away, or detectable warning pieces are missing from crosswalks, those items kind of made the cut on the site. Building exterior really ties to all your windows, building envelope, really keeping your building leak-free around your building. So this includes tuck pointing, looking at your masonry, making sure there aren't any lintels that are leaking or deteriorating, any windows that have gaps in them that are letting water get in. We're trying to, maintain your buildings and keep them going. Roofing, we have a cataloging of all your ages of roofs And what you see in this list really is depicting the age of roofs. It doesn't mean that you got to do them, but they're the first signifiers of when you might want to start looking at them. So for example, the average roof lasts about 20 to 30 years. If you have an EPDM roof, you're on the 20. If you're on the built up roof, you're at a 30-year typical. So if you have a roof that was done in 1990, we're hitting that in this year of 30 years, like, okay, let's take a look at it. Let's see if it's hit its end of its life, if it needs any maintenance work. Doesn't mean that it does. It just means that that's when it becomes on the radar. So there are a number of roofs we have on here that were targeted to be done in 2016, but they've still maintained and doing well. So they're just on that radar list. So that's a clear one of showing you of years of when you might want to tackle. Architectural items. This becomes the key ones that encompass all your interior work, from LED lighting, or interior finishes, your corridors, your ceilings, your 21st century classrooms, your toilets. Looking at, I think we put in this item, site lighting falls in architectural. So one of the safety and security items was illuminating your parking lots and providing site protection, such as bollards and barriers at your entry points. That number kind of is a continuation from your old security pieces that we want to make sure that we keep that on the list for how we would tackle your sites. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing, that's MPE. Those end up picking up all your end of life for your mechanical equipment, boiler replacements, water heaters, piping that you would be looking at, old galvanized piping in your corridors that we'd want to replace. And electrically, that has us updating all your lights to LED for energy efficiency. I kind of bulleted them, but that's in a nutshell how it is summarized at every one of your buildings. As you look through them, you kind of see a total, and this is looking at every building to be equitable. So we want to make sure every building has the same types of finishes, same types of work that is completed at them. You have a subtotal that really becomes what the construction work is today. We have a base cost of today's items. Then we put in there a design contingency and construction contingency. What does that mean? I know we've been looking at this many times in many years, but it's always good to revisit and explain. When you look at a design contingency, we always put that in there because all your building is going to be renovation work. So when you're looking at a building, you start opening up walls, surprises start happening. When we start designing, we start thinking of, okay, we're gonna put a new roof. This is actually what's happening right now for the summer. We're putting a new rooftop unit in. Well, to get access to underneath, there's a lot of existing ductwork. So now we got to take existing ductwork down to get access to put the new rooftop and put structural support and put that stuff up. Those hidden items that you find once you start doing the job, that becomes part of the design contingency. Or for example, we are looking to do all your toilet rooms. As we're doing it, there might be a number of faculty toilet rooms that weren't getting touched that we say, they're sharing plumbing walls. Let's make sure we tackle those as well. It's kind of added scope items. So in our history, we've learned that 10% seems kind of a design, I wouldn't say fluff, but a design expectation of what kind of happens through the process by the time you go out. Construction contingency, that is really, you've heard it many different ways. Allowances, contingencies. Allowances is the common piece that we've done through all our projects with the district, where we base in unforeseen allowances in every prime contract's number. So if you're doing plumbing work, that plumbing contractor might have a 5% allowance in their bid that is there in their contract for, as they open up walls, we can use those types of things for unforeseens or owner requested items that happen during the summer construction. If that stuff doesn't get used, like any project, that gets subtracted from their final contract at the end of the day, and it's money that the district doesn't spend. Sometimes we say it's money you get back, but if it was Mike probably talking, he would say it's money you never spent. Then the last two pieces are the management fees. So as you have a CM on board, you have their CM fee and their fixed general costs conditions for a project, as well as the non-fixed ones, which is trailers or for printing or running trash enclosures, dumpsters, bonds. That kind of encompasses that fee. And then the A is architectural and all the engineers that would be involved for the construction process as well. So I like showing all that because there's no surprise, you get the all-in number at the bottom. So when you're at the board level and you're approving a number, transparency is key. So you're seeing what that final product is on day one when bids come in, and then on September when we are reviewing the number and how it all ended up shakes out at the end of the summer. It's a clear way of watching. Okay, last part is as you go into the building, what you'll notice is there's base cost listed here, but we are projecting from 22 to 2031. The reason nothing is filled in here is exactly like Mike said in the beginning. Right now, there's a whole new list of priorities that we added to this puzzle. And the next part is a really deep conversation with staff and administration of where do we want to put these items? What kind of ranks higher than others? And what we will do is, as we start talking through these and seeing what might have more clout or more importance or more emergency towards the front, we will insert these numbers. And what these cells do is they automatically escalate for the year. So a base cost is today's number, but every year there's a 3% or 4%. We kind of play with them too, depending on how we see things, of escalation. So a number that might be $19,000 today might be $23,000 in 2024. We escalate those numbers as we project out, so we continue providing you accurate numbers and projections out forward, so there's no surprise or minimize surprises as that goes. The good thing is you guys have a good construction manager on board and we work well together, and these are the types of things that we will kind of fill in down the road as we get there, so that when we get this back in front of the board with a recommended projection and a recommended priority list, you guys will feel a lot safer knowing that this is kind of where we fall and this is where it is. That is the nature. The items on the left you'll see is the kind of how it's labeled. For example, Cooper, you have 16 roof areas because you have 16 different zones around your building that were very different vintages. And it lists kind of the problem, lists the corrective measure, and then we have targeted when it was installed, when you might want to redo it, and then the list kind of shows how our units of measure that get us to the cost that we have. Whew. Sometimes I get bogged in the details, but I hope this makes good sense. And now I'm really going to open it up for you guys to ask me for any further clarifications or details you'd like. I figure the next round will be a much deeper level explanation when we have those priorities in the aforementioned years.
Yeah, absolutely, George. Quick question though, on the summary of work for 2022 and beyond, what percentage or what dollar amount was part of the original referendum process? So the furniture was, right?
Correct. So, God, Phil, you'd be a little on the spot. I'd probably find, but I'd bet you it's probably about $20 to $30 million. $30 million. The furniture alone is probably $5 million to furnish all your buildings. The targeted roof areas, that there were certain areas and site areas that were already part of the beginning of the maintenance. I'd say probably 30 to 40, 30. Okay,
so the vast majority of this is new things that we're looking at for down the road then.
I would think so. And you know what? What I'll do before I get this recorded and I spoke out of turn, I'll send the old one to Mike DiBartolo and with a completed what has been done, so you guys can really get a healthy understanding of what was on the original list versus the ad. How about that?
That'd be great. Thanks, George. We've got perhaps maybe 5 minutes before we need to break and get prepared for our regular board meeting. Stacy or Arlen, is there a question that you have for George?
I just had a clarification, just so I'm looking at this correctly. This $145 million and change that you've identified are things based on, useful life or, that you've identified within the next 10 years that need to be done. And that if we were to pay for it all this year, it would cost us the $145 million, inclusive of some of the referendum monies.
That is correct. Now, this list is an all-encompassing of not only maintenance or kind of upkeep for all your roofs and mechanical systems, but it also is future learning, 21st century design, things that would be kind of aligning with your educational philosophy. So it is also items that go above and beyond of things that the district is targeting to do.
All
right?
right. And then the other question that I have is there, it separate and apart from the contingencies that you have, which you go with any construction project, is there sort of a CAT contingency? For instance, we get a new boiler and it's outside its warranty period, but before its natural, anticipated natural life, and it blows up and we've got to address it. Is there any sort of fail-safe fund that we're setting aside for those items which, are relatively unforeseen outside of what you've identified here?
That's actually a really good point, Stacy. In this plan, there isn't. The surprise, something that you put in last year breaks down 3 years from now isn't in the list of items that are on this.
Stacy, that is something that we look at in the budget though, and in the operations and maintenance fund, we set aside money for repairs and new materials that may come up that were unanticipated. So we do plan for that outside of this. We may not plan as high level or high dollar amount as worst case scenario, but we do plan for that in the O&M fund. And then to the point about, is this everything? Obviously, this isn't what's needed necessarily. This is what is anticipated to arise. But as things cycle through and get more life, we expect some of this to come down. And an example of contingencies, this year's contingency was only 4%, and we didn't even spend the 4%. So this is a worst case scenario plan, we hope, and gives us the ability to look at how to fund it.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
I wanted to throw something because I neglected to say it in the beginning, but as much as you guys have been familiar with me and I get a lot of the credit, a lot of the real work happens. Dave Fleming, who's actually part of this tonight, I have him attached, you could say hi. He's actually been the project architect that's been kind of taken over on the drawing side of things. So you probably have seen his face walking around field verifying, but he is an instrumental part of the team in helping not only put this together, but also in the trenches doing the drawing. So you'll get used to seeing him more often.
Good evening, everyone. Pleasure working with this district.
Bill?
Thanks, Dave. Go ahead, Art.
So I had a long talk with Michael earlier today and ran a lot of questions by him. Just because I got to say it, I am frustrated that when we did the referendum, I asked, and you may recall, Phil, asked numerous times whether we should go higher in terms of what we were doing. And apparently at that time, we didn't look at all of these things that would be coming down the pike. And we probably could have raised what we raised the referendum at that time with no problem. It's water under the dam, but I think it's unfortunate. The good news is Michael said that, George, that you'd be able to complete all this $145 million for $79.9. So I'm pleased with that, and I accept that number, George.
Okay, it's comedy hour here at District 21.
That's right.
Okay, we are closing in on about 5 minutes to 7. So unless someone else, Michael, if you got anything else or.
No, I planned for a 5-minute at the end, so this worked out perfectly.
Very good. Very good. All right. George, Dave, thank you very much. Michael, as always, very
Thanks, George.
Thank you.
Good seeing everybody. Can't wait till the point where we finally get in person.
Look forward to it. We still have that spaghetti dinner, George, coming.
Yes, we do.
Remember this, we are taking minutes here, guys.
That's true. Well, it was spaghetti without the sauce.
Okay. With that, at 6:54, the Finance Committee is adjourned. Thank you all very much, and we'll see board members and staff